So I wanted to discuss Brian De Palma's Vietnam War film, Casualties of War, released in 1989, starring Michael J. Fox and Sean Penn. In particular, I wanted to discuss the epilogue because this has been an issue with many critics who thought the film was great, except they didn't like the ending. They thought it was too sentimental, that it wasn't necessary, that the movie would be better off without it. And even I pretty much held the same view back in 1989 when it was released. I mean, I loved the film, but I just didn't necessarily think the ending was, imperative. Now, to discuss what the ending is, it really begins with the prologue where Michael J. Fox, who plays Erickson, he's a Vietnam War veteran, and he's sleeping on a train, and he sees a young woman enter the train who looks very familiar, reminds him of somebody during his Vietnam War experience. And so it triggers this big flashback, which is the bulk of the film, set in Vietnam, and it's about his traumatic experience in the war. And the scene, essentially, especially with the prologue, it really illustrates a veteran suffering from his own combat related post traumatic stress. And some critics didn't like the fact that the epilogue seemed to forgive his character. Some even described the epilogue as being corny. But for me, it's not really about forgiving Erickson, but it's about Erickson simply not living the rest of his life with guilt. It's about turning the page. And it's not corny either. In fact, the lines are quite subtle. What is corny about these lines, right? The girl who reminds him of the Vietnamese lady in his flashback. She says, "You had a bad dream, didn't you?" Erickson responds, "Yes." Then she says, "It's over now, I think." Then the music swells, and that's the end of the film. That's corny. I'm sorry, but that is about as subtle a way to send a message as any movie can get. Now, you compare that to Saving Private Ryan, which is a war movie, of course, everybody loves, directed by Steven Spielberg. To all who are critical of De Palma's epilogue, I want to ask, what did you think of Saving Private Ryan's epilogue? Were you okay with the sight of this old man running around a cemetery, weeping uncontrollably and begging his wife to assure him that he was a good man? Because I have to tell you, I feel like that moment in Spielberg's movie is way more over the top and way overly sentimental than what you see in Casualties of War. And then there's the message that Spielberg is sending. So this poor old man has felt guilty his entire life since the war. I mean, you have Tom Hanks as a dying captain grabbing Ryan by the lapel and saying, you earned this. And Spielberg seems to be advocating this. Well, as a veteran myself, I have to say, if I were to save someone, I wouldn't be saving him so that he would feel guilty for the rest of his life, because that's no way to live. I would, especially in the case of Ryan, I'm saving this guy so that he can return to his mother safely, because all of his brothers are dead, all of her sons are dead. I just want him to be a good son to his mother. That's it. On the other hand, Brian De Palma is sending exactly the opposite message in Casualties of War. He's telling Erickson and us, the film goer, as well as I think America itself, that we don't have to live with guilt for the rest of our life, and we can move on from the Vietnam War, which I think is a much healthier lesson. Now, I guess back in 1989, I can kind of understand why we resisted such a message. We were kind of in a dark mood when it came to the Vietnam War. We were jaded. We didn't mind a pessimistic film, especially about the Vietnam War, but we just weren't ready to move on then. We're living in the 21st century now, and we in fact have moved on from the war. Not only do I appreciate the ending now, but I think it's absolutely necessary. I can't imagine watching such a brutal and tough story like Casualties of War, which is based on a real incident, without some glimmer of hope at the end. And De Palma doesn't beat us over the head with optimism here. He simply believes that we can finally turn the page on a period that brought us a lot of anguish and a lot of ugliness. And I, for one, am grateful to Brian De Palma for giving us such an important film.